If you look back through your history with the group, which extends way beyond the 13 years as CEO, it's always been a cornerstone of portfolios because it's always been an outperformer. But nowadays, that magic doesn't seem to be there. And why I say that is if you were to buy Remgro today, you're buying it at 60 cents in the rand. You're at a discount of 40% on the Remgro share price to the value of the underlying assets. And
Yes, absolutely right, Alec. And I think the one thing that I just want to be upfront with is we don't determine the discount to NAV. The market determines that. The only thing that we can do is to make sure that the underlying companies perform well, that they generate cash flow, that we can got the ability to generate cash at the center, pay dividends. We even declared a special dividend today. Yes, so, and then the discount hopefully will narrow. I mean, it's been a thing lately of what has happened is if you just look from an international point of view, I mean, discounts of holding companies is actually increased quite significantly over the last 5 years. So it's an international phenomenon, just not something that's applicable to Remgro. And maybe it's not the flavor of the month or the flavor of the decade of being investment holding company.
really coming at it as a member of the business community who's looking there and saying, hey, I always like to buy a rand's worth of assets for 60 cents, but actually I might be buying more than a rand's worth of assets because Remgro is a conservative. You guys aren't going to be doing any creative accounting. If anything, you would be conservatively valuing it there. So is that is that just being over optimistic, or are you getting pretty close to true value now on the books?
I'm confident if we have to realize this portfolio and go out to the market, in which we're not going to do because I think we've got a very specific purpose in the South African economy to fill. But I think we can get more than the asset value that we put the value because we'll unlock the liquidity discounts and discounts that we put up. So I'm still think that we conservative value assets, you're probably getting more than the rand. Maybe you're right. But obviously, that is something that you will be in the proof of the pudding.
I've been talking to the guys a lot, the investment analysts, about this delisting wave that we're seeing on the JSE because companies are just so cheap. Now, no one's going to come along and buy Remgro, but Remgro might be going along and buying other cheap assets. Are you seeing anything there that's starting to appeal to you?
Yes, I mean, I said this morning at the end of this presentation, we're open for business. We're looking for opportunities. Unfortunate to commit in a very, let's put it mild, in a volatile environment, not just in the South African context, but on a global basis, what's happening out there, to commit a huge amount of money into investment where things is volatile at the moment and unsure at the moment. So your risk premium that you put on any asset that you actually want to buy, it becomes quite significant, and then the numbers doesn't always work. And so, but hopefully things will calm down in the future and we'll see more opportunities. But at the moment, I mean, you probably know it better than I, Alec, that the economy is not growing, high unemployment rates, consumer is not spending. So what we see in across all industries that we operate in, probably even that we don't operate, there's overcapacity because, I mean, the assembly lines, I mean, the production lines, they are not actually utilized fully. So there is capacity. So you don't need to put down new factories, and that doesn't create unemployment. So I don't see the situation getting much better in the short term unless we get economic pro-growth policies, getting the economy kicking again. And that is so critical for economic growth. So what is happening in no volume growth? So what we're fighting other people in the market. And what is that we've done? Well, we gained market share across our companies. And that is what it's all about because there's no natural tailwind. I think a indicator that I always use quite significantly is just the number of people on medical aid. That hasn't grown over the last 5 years. Actually, if you took the numbers might have been stable, but the people are buying down, they're buying cheaper products in that. So it's actually going backwards. And it's very, very difficult for companies to actually have meaningful growth in this environment. So Remgro is a reflection of South Africa Inc. So we really linked to the growth of the South African economy. But I think we've shown that we can outgrow the growth of the economy by having better quality assets, better management teams, and thinking outside the box and being innovative. Although I think so, but unfortunately, at the end of the day, long term, we're also tied to the South African economy, which is not great. I mean, sitting at these high unemployment figures, the rates, is just unacceptable for a country of our stature.
The election last year did have a surprise result for many people and a surprise consequence with the government of national unity. Lots of excitement, but it does appear as though the early glow, the honeymoon is over, and we haven't really seen much upkick in the economy. Are you seeing anything, any signs that you could share with the rest of society that can give us hope that there might be better days ahead?
Yeah, my glass is always half full, so maybe I can just share something. I think the one thing I'm quite involved in some of these work streams of government where we talk about on the logistics side, on the energy side, as well as crime and corruption. So I think the intervention, not the intervention, but the support of the private sector and the resources we've made available, load shedding is dramatically better, and that also impact on our results. Logistics is still a challenge of the specific challenges with regard to the railways and Transnet and people moving slowly. And then the crime and corruption, although it's not so visible, but behind the scenes, we're making significant progress, helping South Africa getting off the grey list. Also, a digital evidence unit that we're making available to the NPA via the private sector, that the private sector has come to the party in some other work streams as well. So there is, behind the scenes, a lot of things going on. It's like a duck on the top of the water, but the legs underneath are moving quite significantly. But these things doesn't happen overnight.
So when you sit down with your team and you do strategy, your 5-year plans, what are you projecting for 5 years? Being conservative in business, being accountable about risks. Of course, you can't get terribly overly optimistic because it's going to cost you. But how do you guys scenario plan given where we are at the moment?
I think what we want to do as well is we want to make sure that we don't have too much gearing in the companies, even in underlying companies. So that's why we come from not having gearing at the center. It's always very risky to have financial leverage on top of operational leverage. And that's when you actually go down very quickly. So you need to be careful about your balance sheet and that strong balance sheet. You need to carefully look at your cash flow generation and always to focus on the controllables, but be very much aware of the uncontrollables, what is outside your control, the impact that they can have on the business. And we've seen this movie many times in the past, and that always comes with institutional memory when things like the feed price on the chicken side goes out of whack, the sugar prices goes out of whack, and suddenly you into very trouble. And then if you've got too much gearing at the centers, they teach you very quickly. I mean, it's a travesty what has happened in the last 6 months that we see Goodyear, Seller Metal Amp, so the old E-score is not there anymore. It's been a business to be winding down. And then Marion Roberts, a stalwart of the old industry is not there anymore. It's a travesty to see this. And that is why that's what we want to prevent. We might never be the outperformer, but we'll never bet the farm. And that's why we'll be there in 50 years' time. And we're in good times, we could do well. In bad times, we're quite defensive, good. And I think we always do better in bad times against the opposition because I think we've got good management teams and very strong cash flow generating assets, high quality assets.
And a lot of what you've said could actually be applied even in very small businesses. Just don't overgear, don't borrow too much. Keep your balance sheet strong, get your earnings quality up, etc. But Jannie, you mentioned bet the farm, and it's something that has in this last week has now raised concerns. This Driefontein farm, portion 406, 32 hectares outside of Ekurhuleni, which the Ekurhuleni Metro expropriated without compensation. Now it's fine you expropriate it, and the owner said, fine, they can expropriate it, but they must pay us market value. Now they're going to court, and they've been at court on that thing now for 6 years. Surely, from where you're sitting, this must be worrying.
That will be worrying. If they can't win their court case, I think it's going to be very negative, highly negative consequences for South Africa if that can happen in that space. And I'm not an expert on this, and I probably don't know all the facts, but from what I hear, they actually had development plans and the municipality stopped them, or it was not a useless piece of land lying there. If that is productive land that people wanted to develop for housing or whatever, and then they tried to expropriate in that manner, I think the consequences will be very, very negative.
So how are you going to cut that discount? What are you going to do in the next 12 months to 12 to 24 months that's going to cut the discount to net asset value? Or should we just go and pile up on the shares?
I don't think I can cut the discount because the shareholders must decide that. But what we can do, and hopefully this is part of the early Christmas present, we've increased our final dividend by 34%. We paid out a special dividend of R2. So it's a significant cash dividends that we're going to pay to our shareholders. Even if the discount still persists, which is outside our control, we'll make sure that we increase our dividend above inflation going forward and give good dividends to our shareholders.
Jannie Durand is the Chief Executive of Remgro. I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.